Ever dream about taking a wilderness canoe trip? Well, getting from your backyard to the bush will take a little more than just dreaming about it. I'm John Veman. Join us as we show you how to plan for your wilderness canoe trip on Canada's wild Missinaibi River and make our own adventure on Trailside. All right, the topographical maps to the Missinaibi River, one of Canada's premier wilderness waterways. The Missinaibi is a fully protected provincial park flowing north into James Bay, Ontario. And the best way to experience it is in a canoe. Now, nothing tickles the imagination quite like a wilderness canoe trip. It's one of those rare moments when you're completely on your own, self-contained, self-propelled, and self-reliant. It's a true adventure. But a good adventure comes out of preparation, or what you put into it. And there you want to focus in three areas: skill, equipment, and attitude. Skill, because you're going to be dealing with everything from whitewater to weather to maybe even a medical emergency. Equipment, because your life may depend on how well it performs. And attitude, because only you can get yourself through the wilderness. There's no one to call for help, and the rest of the group is counting on you for support. Now that's a lot to deal with. So this week, we're going to show you exactly how to prepare for it. And we've got some help from some experts as well.
Heads up.
Whoa, hi Dave.
Canoe coming through.
Well, a key member of our party is Dave Getchell, the equipment editor for Backpacker magazine. Besides being an expert on outdoor equipment, Dave's canoed the Missinaibi before. Now what are you doing under there?
Getting my shoulders used to the idea of portaging again. We've got a couple big waterfalls on the river, and carrying a canoe like this is the only way we're going to get around it.
Okay.
Oh, Canadian Map Service. I bet that's the river topos we've been waiting for.
Yep. And here's where we're going. On this 1 to 50,000 scale topo map, 1 mile equals 1 1/4 inches, which is a good compromise between detail and map size. Now reading the contour lines gives you a three-dimensional view of the terrain you'll be crossing. When the lines are closer together, that indicates a steep slope. Further apart indicates you're headed into a flatter section. Now these maps tell you where the rapids are, help you estimate how many miles you can paddle in a day, and give you a good idea of those parts you might want to walk around. They're available from the US and Canadian governments. Well, Getch, how far to the first rapid?
Well, from the put-in here at Matisse, it looks like about 3.5 miles downstream.
Now how did you get to that number so quickly?
Well, since rivers don't come with mileage markers, I draw my own.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Then you know exactly how many miles you've covered in a day.
And it really cuts down on the arguments of how much further it is to lunch. Now let's test your map reading skills. Since I've run the Missinaibi before, why don't you see what you can tell me just from reading these blow-ups I've made?
Okay, well, we're coming into a rapid here, and this one's named, so it's probably worth getting out to scout. And let's see, we've got a dotted line here indicating a portage trail on one bank. So that says at higher water, it's probably a definite walk around. And then this contour line's right up next to the shore, which probably tells you that there's a sheer rock wall facing the river on one side.
Nice call on the rock cliff, John. Here we are running that same rapid last year.
And there's the contour line right there.
That's right. Now let's zip downstream to mile 33, where things start to get more interesting.
Yeah, I'll say. These lines headed downstream with the current indicate riffles. And they're coming right into, yep, there's a waterfall. That bracket right there indicates a waterfall. These slash marks across the river indicate that there's some other significant drops following it. And then these contour lines that are on each shoreline tell you that we're actually into a canyon. So that looks pretty nasty. I'd say we better be thinking about carrying around that one.
Sounds like you've been there before.
Well, I haven't. Is this it?
Here's a shot right at the edge of Thunderhouse Falls. See this drop right here? It's about 15 feet. That's right where the bracket is on the map we saw earlier.
Now that's not even runnable in a kayak.
No, it's not. In fact, the portage trail around Thunderhouse is the better part of a mile. Now, how about this sheet?
Okay, looks like we're in a big stretch of flat water. There's no contour lines crossing the river anywhere. Nice flat spot. Well, to mile 24, this is about where we'd be looking to camp for the night. And Bear Rock Point sounds like a great place to camp.
Sounds great. It's a nice open point of rock going out in the river. Trouble is, see all this marshy area around here? Mosquito heaven. We'd be lucky to get out alive.
So I guess you can't tell everything from looking at a topo map, huh?
No, you need to fill in the gaps any way you can. When I researched this trip last year, I talked to paddlers who'd run the river, I talked to outfitters, read stories in obscure paddling journals. I even went into the stacks at the university library.
Sounds like you didn't leave any stone unturned.
Tried not to.
Well, rapids, portages, flat water, every river has its own character. And now that we have a good feel for this one, it's time we pick a canoe to run it. A canoe is a considerable expense, so you want to test paddle a few before you buy any one. Now, they all have their design virtues, but they probably have a trade-off somewhere, so your goal is to find the right canoe for your application or how you intend to use it. And one guy that knows a lot about using a canoe is Steve Landick. In what was dubbed the Ultimate Canoe Challenge in the 1980s, Steve paddled over 28,000 miles in 3 years, set a record for the long-distance canoe trip. He's probably taken a canoe where few canoes have gone before. Hi, Steve.
Hey, John.
Is that the canoe you want to take to the Missinaibi?
Well, it's a portage's dream. Why don't you heft it up there and see how it feels?
Okay. Oh, you aren't kidding. That's light.
About 50 pounds, maybe.
Oh. Now, how come that's so light? What's causing that?
Well, it's made out of a high-tech material called Kevlar.
Uh-huh.
But you can see, I think they might have gone a little bit too light on the layup here.
Yeah, that's a lot of flex.
It's a lot of flex, and it's going to be more fragile. You know, we're on a wilderness river. It'd be a long hike out if we put a big gash in this boat.
Okay, well, you want to take a look at some of these over here on the rack?
Yeah.
This one on the top's a wooden canvas canoe.
Nice boat. Nice looking canoe.
Yeah, it's pretty, but, that's pretty heavy. That must be 70 pounds.
Oh, this one here is closer to 90.
Uh-huh.
And, after a few weeks on the river, it's going to absorb a little water, gain a little weight.
Yeah, so we shouldn't take this one, huh?
Well, there's a lot of experienced paddlers that still prefer wood canvas, but it's just not my choice.
Okay, now how about this one? This is an aluminum canoe?
Well, these old aluminum canoes, they've been all over. It's a very strong hull, a little on the noisy side, but the thing that I really don't like about these boats is the keel that goes down along the bottom. It's a small keel, they call it a shoe keel, but there's still a tendency for those to hang up on rocks. When you run in some white water and you hang up on a rock.
And that'll flip you right over?
No time at all. And the material itself actually has a tendency to grab a hold of a rock.
Now what about this canoe down here?
No, there's just the opposite. This boat is going to slide right over a rock.
You want to take it off the rack?
Yeah, let's take a closer look.
Oh, it's pretty light anyway.
Oh, I tell you, this is a light hull for a Royal X canoe.
Now, Royal X, what kind of material is that?
Well, Royal X is a plastic laminate. There's a foam core sandwiched in between two layers of plastic. Very tough boat. Great for impact resistance. Notice how that bounces right back.
Yeah.
And there's not too much flex, which a lot of Royal X canoes have.
Yeah.
Good trade-off.
Well, what other design features should we be looking at?
Well, on a river that has a lot of flat water, you want a canoe that tracks. And in order to get that, you need a straight keel line. Keeps the very ends of the canoe right in the water. And it's just going to track better. It's going to run a straighter course. Okay,
well, if it's going to run a straight course well, it's probably not going to turn very easily, so how are we going to turn this?
Well, I'll show you. Let's flip him over there.
Okay.
Okay, what we can do, say we're coming up on a rock, we want to make a hard turn. We lean that boat up a little bit, and that's going to put that rocker in the canoe, and then it's going to spin just like we want it to.
So we're creating a little bit of a pivot point here in the middle of the canoe by bringing up the ends, and that's helping us compensate for the lack of turning ability. Huh?
You bet.
So paddling skill is the secret there, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
What other features do we look at?
Well, right up here in the bow, we've got a nice flare, and that flare is going to shed the water. It's going to keep it from going in the boat where we don't want it.
And that'll probably make it firmer in the waves as you go through a rapid,
yeah, I think so, a little more stable.
Now what about the height from the deck here down to where the water line would be? That's a lot of surface area going to get caught by the wind. Is that going to be a problem?
Good point. Yeah, and it can be a problem, but it's a trade-off that I'm willing to make.
Okay, that's probably going to also help us shed water in the rapids.
You bet. It's going to be a dryer.
You want to take her out and try it?
Yeah, let's take this thing for a spin.
Now what's with all the baggage? I thought we were just going out for a day trip.
Yeah, the only way to test out a wilderness tripper is with a load in it.
Well, before heading out and putting your canoe through the paces, it's a good idea to check your paddle length, since it may change from one canoe to the next depending on the seat height. Now you do that by sitting erect in the canoe, then with your arm fully extended, the critical dimension is from your top hand down to just above the water line. Now this is the right shaft length for this canoe, paddling straight ahead with a bent shaft terrain paddle. Your straight shaft paddle you want to have a little bit longer in the shaft so that you can get better control and a longer reach in rapids. You about ready to go?
Yeah, enough talk for me, John. Let's paddle.
Okay, you ready?
Right behind you.
I know you, Steve. I'll bet you want to paddle marathon style, so you want to call the switch or should I?
Why don't you let me call him today, John? That way I can see how well she tracks. Hep.
You know, I'll bet people confuse the constant switching of a marathon style with just making work for yourself.
Hep. Well, it might look that way, but we got a couple things going for us with this style. All our energy is directed forward. Hep. And every few strokes, we get to rest alternate muscle groups. Also pays off to have a light paddle and a canoe that runs straight. Hep.
Now, how do you judge whether a canoe's tracking well?
Any canoe will veer away from the stern man's side. Hep. So as we go down the river, the canoe's going to be veering back and forth slightly. Hep. I can tell how well she tracks by how often we have to switch to get her back on course.
Now, how are we doing with this boat?
I'm surprised. This is great for a wilderness tripper. Hep. I'd say we're getting 6-7 strokes on the side.
Well, what do you say we go find a riffle and see how well she maneuvers?
Hey, that sounds good to me. Let's hit her. Hit.
Oh, it came right in there.
Yeah, that felt good, John. Spun right around.
Didn't have to hardly lean it up on its side at all.
Well, you gotta let the river work for you, and it was doing it there.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have a nice current, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you want to peel out and head on downriver?
All right, sounds good. Lean her up. So, John, what do you think of this boat?
Well, I think it works pretty well for me. I mean, we've been able to put it pretty much anywhere we wanted to, and you know, it's a little slow, but I wouldn't call it sluggish. Yeah, I think it works for me.
Well, we're running dry. Don't have any water in. I think they've reached a good compromise between maneuverability and tracking. I think this is the boat for us.
So we take it to Canada, huh?
Let's do it.
Choosing a tent is a lot like choosing a canoe. You really want to sort out your specific needs and then shop around. Hey, Dave. Hi, Annie.
Hi, John.
Hey, JV.
Well, Annie Getchell is the fourth member of our party. She's paddled the Missinaibi with her husband, Dave. And like Dave, she likes to write a lot about outdoor equipment. In fact, she's just completed her first book on the care and repair of it. Well, Annie, what do you recommend for a tent on the Missinaibi?
But I'd like one that goes together fast so that when you're in a cloud of bugs, you have a quick refuge. And one that has good mosquito netting.
Mm-hmm. This one went up real fast,
Yep.
didn't it?
Well, Annie, could you put the rain fly on this one while I show John a couple other tents we've got pitched out here in the woods?
Sure.
Now, why do you have them back here in the woods?
Well, that's where we'll be camping on the Missinaibi, so we might as well try them out in a realistic setting. And whatever tent we take, I want to make sure it's freestanding. The only reason you should have to stake out a tent is to keep it from blowing away. Here's a nice small freestanding two-person backpacking tent. This baby weighs less than 6 pounds. Be a great choice for where weight and space are critical. But since we're going to be canoeing, we can afford to take a little extra weight with us. We could go with a tent as large as this one here. This is a 4-person dome tent.
Oh, this is big enough for a whole family to fit inside, isn't it?
This is the typical size for a family camping tent. Nice features of it is we've got full standing headroom. We've got mesh skylights in the roof for ventilation and let in good light. And we've got floor space to burn with this. In fact, that might be a liability on the Missinaibi, because some of those campsites in the woods are really small, and this tent might not even fit.
Probably weighs a ton too, doesn't it?
Well, for its size, it's not bad. It's 12 to 15 pounds. I don't know about you, but that's more weight than I want a portage.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is to go down a size class. This is a 2 to 3 person tent, but just because you're going down a little bit in size doesn't mean you really have to compromise on comfort. This tent's big enough, got stretch out room for 2 people inside. You've got plenty of gear storage under this covered vestibule.
Oh, it even comes with its own stern paddler.
Hey, guys, what's up?
Hey, you want to come on a tent tour with us?
Yeah, I'm right behind you.
Okay.
The other nice feature about this tent is that you've got another covered vestibule over the back door. Zip this open here, you've got more covered storage area for equipment.
That feels good. A little more air in here. Thanks, Dave.
Well, look at this. Annie's got this all set up already. It almost looks like a living organism, almost like a snail.
Well, this tent's about as weatherproof as a snail, too. Annie and I have had a tent like this going on 7 years now and been through all sorts of storms with it. One of the nicest features is the way the rainfly comes right down to ground level so that you get wind-driven rain in a storm, stays outside the tent where it belongs. It's got a nice covered vestibule over the front door. If you look through there, you see it's got a back door for flow-through ventilation.
It's also got a bow paddler inside.
Yeah. I like the way this tent went together in about, I don't know, under 5 minutes. I think we should take this on the river.
Yeah.
Sounds like that decision's made for me.
Yeah, well, what do you think for Steve and I?
Well, I'd say that seeing where Steve's taking his siesta, he's made that one too. That tent will work great for you guys because you've got enough room for both of you to stretch out, and with the dual vestibules, you got all sorts of gear storage space. And plus, at 10 pounds, it won't be hurting you on the portages.
Sold. Well, shelter is important, but good first aid is critical. To make sure I didn't miss anything, I checked in with wilderness medicine expert Doc Forgey. So what do you have for me, Doc?
Well, I brought you a medical kit, and of course we have the normal things that you'd expect, but I did bring some special things for a canoe trip. One of these is a new type of bandaging material. This is actually a micropore filter, so that it will breathe, but yet it does not allow water, or not, shall we say, germs, to go through the other side in contaminated water. Now, for example, let's say you had a cut right here.
Right.
By placing this over a wound, a nice dry wound, after you've taped it up, you can cover it in such a way that you can actually go swimming with it or canoe, be in the rain, and it won't affect the wound at all.
Well, look at that. Hardly even know it's there. Now, that's got to be for a dry wound?
That's correct. Only a dry wound, because if it leaked, it'd bulge it up.
Yeah, for other kinds of skin abrasions, blisters and stuff like that, I like to use these gel pads as well, too.
These are wonderful, and this is also a very wonderful product to use on burn care, too. So this is a perfect thing to add to the medical kit.
Well, we're going on a canoe trip, and the thing that really can stop a canoe trip cold, believe it or not, is an eye injury. You know, something floating into your eye, or even something from like a piece of cinder from a fire or something like that. What do you do about that?
First thing to do is have the patient put their head underwater and blink. That might dislodge it. Next, of course, you're going to need to see if there's a foreign body in the eye if they're still having pain. Now, you might be able to examine it without pain medicine, but generally you need a topical anesthetic, something to numb the eye up. Once you've put the drop in the eye, then you need to examine the eye very carefully. The best way to do that is take a pen light. Go up to the eye with the pen light and rotate the pen light around with the light shining. If there's a foreign body in there, it'll cast a shadow. If you see a shadow moving, there's a foreign body that you need to remove, and you might use a soft piece of cloth to try to flick it out.
Oh, okay. Now let's see if we've got something more, another kind of injury, like how about a cut, a good serious laceration? Now once you've treated the person, of course, for shock and you've stopped the bleeding, what about sewing it up? I mean, do you use your bootlaces or what?
I had a friend once who tore apart a canvas tent and used the canvas to sew up a buddy. But actually, you know, the next step is to do what your mom would have done, and that's clean the wound out thoroughly. And irrigation with clean water is the best way to do that.
Okay.
Then you do have to consider closing the wound.
Well,
Now,
let's say we've got Mr. Helping Hand here, and
Okay.
he's our cut right here.
Well, you try to tape it up if you could. You could use butterfly types of bandaging or these special surgical bandagings. But sometimes you'll have a wound that just spreads and has tension on it. You cannot close it without sewing it up. Then maybe the best thing is to use a staple device. This is a non-prescription stainless steel staple. And to use it, it's very simple. Just pinch the wound together, place the device right over it, and squeeze, and in one quick motion, it puts it in. Now, it would hurt. This would be painful, but it's quick.
Yeah, well, if it's closing up the wound, that's what counts. But what happens if you have to watch this for infection, right?
You do. Anytime you either tape or staple or stitch a wound shut, you increase the chance of infection. So you have to watch this wound. If it starts swelling, becoming more painful or red, you're going to have to remove that tape or take the staples out and put warm, moist packs to it to promote healing at that point.
Okay. And what if you're out in the wilderness and you've got something that's involving some serious pain? Is there any way the average person can deal with that?
Well, there's a variety of prescription products for this. The most powerful available that's very easily usable is nasal inhaled Stadol. Now, this is actually a nose spray. It's 10 times more powerful than morphine, so it's a very, very powerful prescription, but it can remove pain rapidly.
Now that's probably better than, say, a hypodermic, which you can't get across international borders without having to do some explanations. Huh?
That's correct. It's easy to travel with this and safe to use.
Yeah. Speaking of hypodermics, looks like you've got something here to treat allergic reactions. These are some automatic injectors.
That's correct. You know, you cannot get away from bees no matter where you canoe, and if you develop a serious reaction, anaphylaxis to an allergy of a bee or some other animals too, you might need this injectable medication. This is the automatic injection syringe. It also comes in regular syringes too that you have to administer yourself.
Okay, now where do you administer it? What location on the body is the best place to do this?
The best place would be to choose the anterior lateral thigh right out here. Clean the area off and inject it in that location.
Okay. Now all of these components to a first aid kit, a lot of them are available just right off the shelf, and you can get them individually, but you can also just get them prepackaged in some of these prepackaged first aid kits that even come in a waterproof bag, huh?
That is correct, but if you're going to bring a kit, you should also know how to use it, and that means you may need to pick up one of the many references on wilderness medical care. They'll show you diagnosis and treatment techniques.
This looks like a pretty good one.
Well, it is, I think, John.
But there's a lot of other good ones on the shelf.
There are
right?
many real good ones on the market.
Good. Well, thanks, Doc. Well, I think I've got the last of it.
Oh, great. I'm down to my last carrot.
Okay.
Take those off the meals.
Well, preparing your meals as a group is the only way to go on a canoe trip. It's a lot more fun, and it's a lot more efficient.
And it adds variety, too, because that way everybody fills out all the stops and brings their best recipes on the trip.
Okay, now what can I do to give you a hand here?
Oh, pretty much what I'm doing. Just depackaging. That saves a lot of volume in your pack. Whoop, wrong way. And I've also been dehydrating, and so I've got nectarines and strawberries, and today's carrot day, so I've been dehydrating carrots. That's about 3 or 4 pounds of carrots, and that's what's in here too. And you can see how much space and weight I'm going to save. That only weighs a couple ounces right there.
It's really probably not fair to have any one person in charge of the meal planning and getting all the food together for a 2-week trip.
Yeah, that adds up. So we're just dividing it in half. So for a 2-week trip, 2 canoes, each boat will have 7 dinners and 7 breakfasts.
Okay, and you're putting together one of the meals here?
Yeah, I thought I'd go for a Native American theme, and so I'm making a wild rice pumpkin casserole. Wanna
Okay,
help?
sure. Can I give you a hand?
Yeah, I'll start with a couple scoops of rice, and then you can throw in what you like.
Now, it looks like you've already cooked this. How come you've done that?
Well, I guess after canoeing all day, the last thing I want to do is cook. I just want to add water and be done with it, so that's why I did that. And it also saves a lot of fuel, which we're going to be carrying our own. So.
Okay, now these are onions and
Herbs from the garden.
peas.
Yeah, there's some cranberries.
And what's this stuff over here?
That's my jack-o'-lantern from last year.
Jack-o'-lantern. Looks like something I saw lying on the road out there.
No, John, it's pumpkin. All right, how about a bag? Let's put that right in there.
You just throw it in? How did you measure it?
Well, you can probably tell I'm not big on measuring stuff. So I just sort of guess. I kind of figure 4 hearty servings ought to take care of us. And we start each meal with a light course of soup. Kind of, yeah, it looks like 4 servings.
Okay.
And also, you know, you don't want to have leftovers because that'll bring animals into the camp. And if you've been eating and snacking all day like you should be, you're not going to be just starving for a big dinner.
Yeah, so you've got snack foods? What kind of snack
I
foods do you?
It's in the oven at some point.
Okay.
I made energy bars.
Well, they smell good.
Yeah, my friend Susie gave me this recipe.
That's an awful lot.
Well, no, it's enough for 4 of us for the 2 weeks. And there's fruit and nuts and grains.
Can I dig in here?
Yep,
Look at that.
yep. And I put those in my pocket during the day, and if anybody gets cranky, I just pop them in an energy bar, and
Off you go.
yep, mellows them right out.
Now, what's in this container over here?
Well, in there I got coffee and tea. That's like a traveling cafe, and so you know, the person who's the cook for the day will just sort of be in charge of that box, and that way that no one has to rummage in their pack if they just want a cup of coffee.
Yeah, real efficient way to go, huh?
Yep. And if you did do everything that we just said, in this bag here, you'll have enough food for 2 people for 2 weeks.
That's some pretty efficient planning,
Yeah.
too. When you travel with a canoe on a vehicle, you want to always have 4 tie-down points. Now, the 2 belly bands on the crossbars will hold the canoe securely to the roof racks, and the lines front and rear will keep it from twisting in the crosswinds. Now, you want your lines to be taut, but not so tight that they might crease the canoe or maybe even crack it. And most important, don't just tie your lines and then forget about them. You want to stop and double check them after you've traveled a couple of miles, and then every stop after that. Oh, hey.
Checking your granny nuts?
Yeah, granny knots. That's the world famous trucker's hitch. It's my job to do that. How about yours?
Well, the food and the cook kit and the fuel, everything's all in.
Good.
All set.
All right.
Paddles in.
Oh, there you go.
2 sticks per man.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Oh.
Maps here.
Now, what are
So
you
we know
doing?
where we're going.
What are you doing in there?
Packing and keeping an eye on the likes of you.
Well, planning for a canoe trip can be a lot of fun. Above all, it gives you a chance to evaluate the compatibility of your team. You know, how well everyone gets along can be the deciding factor in a successful canoe trip. But if you've done your job well, everything should flow about as smoothly as the river itself.
Heads up.
At last, we're at the put-in for our 10-day canoe trip on Ontario's Missinaibi River. After weeks, now make that months of preparation and planning, it's time for the ultimate test. Now, the Missinaibi is one of the last free-flowing rivers feeding into James Bay, but we're by no means the first canoes to float it. Native Cree and Ojibwa tribes were actually the first to negotiate its more than 50 rapids. And then the voyagers made a commercial route out of it to get furs and supplies through this wild country. Canoes were pretty much the vehicle of choice until about the 1930s, or when the railroad was completed. And what put the voyagers out of business, though, was actually just the ticket for modern-day paddlers. In fact, it's how we're going to get back to the car at trip's end.
Hey, watch it.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't see you there. Well, a big part of my planning was to choose a good partner, so I called Steve Landick. He set the record for the longest canoe trip, 28,000 miles. And he's the kind of guy who dreams of even more. His latest dream is a 3,000-mile solo canoe crossing of the Atlantic. Now that's one I'm going to see in the headlines. Hey, what are you doing? Some custom rigging here?
Well, that's right. I guess all those miles taught me a few things. When it comes to rigging a boat, I think about 3 things: safety, comfort, and trim. Everybody knows how important safety is out on the river, but to me, comfort is just as important.
Okay, well, let's go back to trim for a minute. You're talking about the level of the boat fore and aft.
Yeah, we can adjust for that by where we put the seats and where we put our gear. Now, I've put some trim lines on both the bow and the stern. We can ask our partners if it looks like our boat is down on the bow, level, or maybe down on the stern.
Okay, now what are some of these other things you've done to the boat?
Okay, we got bow and stern lines, fore and aft for quick release. And we've got a throw line for rescues.
Oh, always a good idea on a wilderness canoe trip. You've done some custom rigging of the seat?
Yeah, I like to be comfortable whether I'm sitting or kneeling for extended periods. And these knee pads will give us positive contact.
You just glued those in right there. And then you've got some D-rings here. That's to hold the gear in with these lines.
You bet. We don't want to lose anything if we happen to capsize.
I see on the center thwart you've added some padding and some nice shoulder pads. Well, that'll make portaging a breeze, won't it?
Yeah, well, I only got to go that far, but, you know, it'll keep the pain down a little bit.
Okay, and then you've put some bungee cords in here to hold our extra paddle.
Yeah, and we want a quick release on that, too, in case we have to grab one.
Oh, and you've even rigged my bow seat for me. Well, that was nice.
Well, I thought you might like that.
Let's see. Oh, I see you've moved the original placement of the seat a full seat length forward. Why would you do that?
Well, a couple of things in mind. The closer you get to the front, the skinnier it is, easier it is for you to reach over and paddle, more efficient. And for trim, you and I weigh about the same, right? And so I put the bow and the stern seats same distance from the ends.
So I guess what I'm hearing here is you don't just take a canoe from the factory and go right out into the bush.
That's right. Oh, yeah, and one other thing, John, I got a map for you up front here. You're going to be our navigator.
Okay. Well, this will keep the map nice and waterproof, won't it? Annie and Dave Getchell will be in the second canoe. Annie's just completed her first book on outdoor gear, care, and repair, and Dave is the equipment editor at Backpacker magazine. Well, you guys look like you must have a system here somewhere.
Yeah, well, if you get as much stuff wet as we have over the years, you develop a system pretty fast.
Okay, well, what is it?
Well, this might look like a plane wreck we've got spread out here, but we really do have a plan. Divide the gear into 3 categories. The first one is stuff that can't get wet. This is things like your sleeping bag, backup food, clothing, cameras, that sort of thing. If any of that stuff got wet on the river, you'd be in a bad way. The second category is stuff that, well, if it gets wet, it's no big deal, or it's likely to get wet anyway, like a tent, or the cook kit, my boots, that sort of thing.
Okay.
That just goes into plain old portage pack, just closes up. The third category is your day gear. This is things you want quick access to during the day, so you don't have to root around in one of these big packs. Bug juice, my water bottle, fishing gear, sunglasses, that sort of thing. This little bag clips to a thwart right in front of you, just like a glove box in a car.
Well, it seems like, wouldn't it be simpler just to have a couple of those really big, totally waterproof bags, put everything in that?
Well, it would be simpler, but the trouble with these bags is that, one, they're pretty pricey. Two, the bags themselves are kind of heavy. But the most practical point against that kind of system is that if I was to put a wet tent or muddy old boots into a bag like this, everything else inside would get soaked too.
Good point. Well, it looks like you guys are just about all packed up, and if I don't get over there and help Steve pretty soon, he's probably going to take off without us. These canoes are really loaded down, but it's nothing compared to what the Voyageurs used to carry.
Yeah, I read that each Voyageur was responsible for 2 or 3 bundles of 90 pounds each. And they had these big 25-foot canoes, and they tried to fit as many of those bundles as they could.
They had to carry huge loads. They could be attacked at any time by other fur traders or Indians. They were always in clouds of bugs. The best thing is it just didn't seem to faze them. They were ready to party at the drop of a hat.
Now, the Missinaibi was a major commercial trade route, right?
Yeah, it was. It was the major overland route between Hudson's Bay and the Great Lakes. In fact, we could turn around and head upriver here and end up on Lake Superior with only 3 or 4 miles of travel on dry land. We'd be on lakes or rivers the whole way.
Well, that's all true, but let's not forget about the native people who developed the canoe and the art of paddling. The voyageurs tend to get all the press because we've got the written record. But the native canoe knew these waters for at least 2,000 years before the first European arrived. In fact, the Missinaibi here is at the very heart of North American canoe culture. And when I paddle this river, I like to think that the spirit of those people paddles with me.
Well, speaking of spirits, I'd say the rain gods are doing a little dance up here.
Yeah, in our last trip, we had our rain gear on 3 or 4 times a day.
Hey, before we get into anything too complicated, let's get our communication down. Like if I see a rock on the right, should I say rock right or should I say go left to avoid it?
Always tell me which direction you want me to go. It's real hard to hear in a rapid, and we need to keep it short and sweet. It's either going to be go right or go left. But the important thing is to be consistent.
It's really hard to overcome that natural instinct to talk about the obstruction you see as opposed to how to avoid it.
Well, that's true, but I'll be dependent on you to tell me which direction to go. Hey, there's Annie.
Yeah, she's pulled over. She's signaling. She's saying, stop, pull over river right. Well, we must be at the head of Rock Island Rapid, and she's probably pulled over to scout it. Whenever you're traveling with more than one canoe in a party, it's always good to have a non-verbal communication system. In this case, we're using the universal river signals, and they're actually quite simple. To signal someone to stop, you just take your paddle, hold it horizontally over your head. To signal them to pull over, say river right, hold it on a diagonal and move it slightly so they can see it. River left, on a diagonal, move it slightly. If everything's okay and they can proceed on straight through, just hold it vertically above your head, moving it just to make sure they can see it. Now you can build on that basic system, but the important thing with your signals is to keep them simple, be consistent, and always direct the other canoe where you want it to go as opposed to pointing out an obstruction somewhere in the river. Are you ready to pull over and scout with them?
Yeah, let's check it out.
Well, what do you guys think of this? You've run it before.
Well, we ran this last year. It was a lot lower water. At this level, it's a whole new can of worms.
You know, what do you think if you were going to run it? How would you do it?
Dry. I'd try to stay dry. I'd try to stay out of the big waves. Pretty much go straight down the middle and to the right of those twin boulders, and then draw real hard to the smooth water over by those cliffs. That'd keep you out of the big waves. Good dry line.
Yeah, I don't see anything in there that would eat you, but I see an awful lot of big waves.
They look fun.
Well, what do you think, Steve?
Well, this rapid certainly deserves our respect, but given the skill level of this group, I think we can do it. Maybe to be on the safe side, I mean, we want to carry our gear around and run it dry.
Definitely.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, good idea. Get rid of all the gear in the boats and just do a fun ride. Oh, they're in it now. They can't turn back anymore.
Right down that peak.
And they lined up good for that first big wave. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Just to the right.
Ooh,
And he's drawing hard.
Yeah.
They're back on center.
you're getting a nice angle on the waves. Oh, they're a little sideways. That's not good. Oh, they strained it out,
Straighten
though.
it out. Okay.
No, they got to switch sides, Getch.
He's trying hard.
There you go.
2 sides. Lined up again.
All right. They missed that rock, though.
Okay, they got one more good drop right at the bottom. You got to get around to the right. And he's run hard.
Paddle hard.
Come on, Getch, bring it around.
Bring it out. There they go.
It stayed pretty dry.
Good run.
Eddied out, and they ended up right where they wanted to be.
Okay, right down the tongue, John. Right in the middle.
Can't miss this one.
Okay, crossbow.
All right.
Okay, draw it.
Straight in.
Woo! Oh, look at those yahoos.
I thought the idea was to miss the waves, not hit every one of them.
Get your baler ready. Woo!
Hey, that was nice. Got some air on that one.
Nice run, you guys, for a submarine.
Catch any trout?
Hey, no trout in this boat, but you know, when you guys turned sideways in there, I thought they were teaching us some kind of new broach stroke.
It doesn't really count as a broach unless you hit the rock. Well, we're loaded up, so why don't you guys grab your packs and we'll head downstream.
All right, they're right over here. We'll grab them. See you down there. Yeah.
You guys hear that?
Is that Kettle Falls, Getch?
Sure is. And we portaged through here last year. Saw this great campsite right next to the main drop. I really want to stay there this time.
It's getting kind of late. I hope it's not too buggy.
Tell someone you're going into the Canadian bush, and their likely first response will be, yuck, bugs. Well, there's no denying that black flies and mosquitoes are part of the experience up here. That doesn't mean you have to be helpless in dealing with them. Now, for my part, I've never found any one thing that works for all people, but I've certainly found a lot of theories.
Yeah, I heard they don't like light colors.
Well, that would make sense, because the dark colors probably hold on to heat, and they're attracted to that warmth.
It's a good theory.
The other option is to take this trip in September when all the bugs are dead, or be out here in the mid part of the day when the bright sun keeps the bugs down.
Yeah? Well, I've heard that they don't like the combination of the red scarf with the blue hat. That's really the ticket.
Yeah, it's working perfect, I can tell.
What's your theory, Steve?
Bugs are a state of mind.
State of mind? You mean just let them make a meal out of you?
It's a matter of acceptance. If you let them get to you, you're not going to have a good trip.
No, hold still. Got that one. Well, there is one thing you can do to deal with the bugs. That is to minimize their chances of getting at you, especially at this time of day. You guys ready?
Ready? It's time to do the dust off. It's an old technique I learned at summer camp in Maine. It's like you brush the bugs off your clothing and out of your hair, and then when you go in the tent, you don't take any freeloaders with you.
Now that's how you deal with bugs.
Looks like a straight shot. Come right down the center of that tongue, slow down in the haystacks, and catch that eddy.
Yeah, it's a classic. You don't see too many like this. We don't need a translator to figure out what Steve is saying. This is actually a good rapid to demonstrate his points. The tongue is this large body of water being funneled right down here in this downstream. And the haystacks he's talking about are these standing waves that are created when all that water piles up. And the eddies are these slight upstream currents that are created by water coming around a natural obstruction like a rock. That's a nice quiet place to hang out if you want to catch your breath in a rapid. And there's actually a good one right down here that's very strong. As the water funnels up on this rock, it comes around and a good part of that energy of the current is coming right upstream. Now the reason Steve said we're going to slow down a little bit as we come into those haystacks is because we don't want to go in with power and have the nose of our boat dive into that aerated water. I mean, it makes for a nice ride on any other day, but when you're wilderness canoeing, you want to be conservative and run dry. So we're going to come just to the side of those waves and probably be a little bit slower than the current. Now let's see how Dave and Annie are going to do on their run. Yeah, they're just pulling out of an eddy there. They made their way out to center stream just to get positioned for the center of the tongue. Annie's bringing herself over with a crossbow draw to line up the bow. Dave's giving her a little direction. Okay. Now they're going to come just to the river left of that standing waves, and they made a clean run. No waves, no water.
Easy, easy.
Want
Got
to
a rock
surf right there?
Toss draw.
Got it.
Draw right a little.
Yep.
And here we go. All right, back it, back it. Whoa. Good move, John.
Excellent. Thank you for missing that rock.
Woo! All right.
I don't know, Steve. You used to have a lot faster response time. What happened to you? Well, that was a nice stretch. Is this Thunderhouse Falls portage here?
It is. Actually, there's a couple of other takeouts down here, depending on the water level, but this one will be the easiest today.
Well, what's the trail like?
Trail's not bad at all. It's mostly downhill. About half a mile long.
Well, judging from the looks of you guys, it's also pretty buggy.
Well, it's buggy, but the head net, bugs don't drive you crazy, so you can enjoy the wildflowers. It's also, the trail's pretty muddy in a couple of places, so make sure you wear your long pants and boots. Andy and I are going to take our packs and go ahead. We'll scout the trail. If there's any blowdowns, we'll take care of them with the axe and saw so you guys can get the canoes through easier.
Okay, we'll meet you down at the end.
Well, from the sounds of it, sounds like we had to do a 1.5 portage.
Yeah, that sounds like the best way to do this one. Well, there are a couple different ways to do a portage, depending on your physical capability. For instance, Dave and Annie, they're going to carry their gear all the way to the end, then Dave will come back and get the canoe. Steve and I will do things a little bit differently. I'll start by taking my gear all the way to the end. Steve will follow with the canoe, but he'll only take it to the halfway point. Then I'll turn around, come back and get it, and Steve will go fetch his gear. It's called the 1.5, and it's a way to make sure nobody has to carry the canoe all the way. So what was the longest portage you've ever been on?
Oh, about 68 miles.
68 miles? That must have been grueling.
Yeah, that one was a little much, but when you're trying to get over the Rocky Mountains, it's the only way you can do it when you're traveling by canoe.
Jeez.
Some people don't even like the short ones, but I like to stretch my legs and see the country from a different angle. Something about hitting the portage trail with all the gear I need for days, strapped right on my back. Just gives me a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, well, the canoe's really the ideal vehicle for that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. And you know, the whole of Canada, east of the Rockies, is a maze of interconnected waterways, separated by just short portages. So if you got the time, you got a canoe, it's yours for the taking.
The portaging really gives you a chance to get out and stretch your legs and take a look around at the beautiful country you're traveling through. Well, I've put my pack to the end of the trail, and it looks like Steve's turned around to pick up his. You know, portaging a canoe still means you're putting 70 pounds on your shoulder, and that weight is really just a guarantee that you're not going to run into many people at the end of the portage trail, and it's kind of a small price of admission to a really incredible wilderness. It's a good thing we decided to portage this one.
That's the only way you can see that view.
Well, what do you say we go down there and take a closer look?
Sounds good.
Pretty amazing.
Great. That's supposed to be some of the oldest rock on Earth.
You can almost kind of feel it quaking. I think that's just the vibration coming off the water. A rainy day on a canoe trip doesn't have to be the end of your fun. Let me show you what I mean. I've heard this is the most posh piece of real estate on the whole river.
You might call this a 2-bedroom apartment with a river view.
Oh yeah? Well, show me around.
Well, let's start with the guest quarters.
Ah, nice and roomy. Wonderful view.
Thanks for letting in the mosquitoes, John. What we have over here is a master bedroom suite.
Yeah?
It's modest in size, but we picked it that way specifically to fit on the small tent sites you find out here in the bush.
Ah, nice color too. Now what is this?
This is our covered country kitchen.
Looks like your everyday lightweight nylon tarp to me.
It is, but it's also the most versatile 1.5 pounds you can carry in your pack.
And I see you've given our rescue rope a double duty here as a structural member, huh?
Makes a good ridge line. The rescue bag's one of those things you find new uses for all the time. We've also rigged the tarp with nylon parachute cord pullouts at the corners and some of the stakeout loops along the side to tension the whole thing.
Always good to have an extra hank of that in your pack, huh?
I carry 50 feet at least. But the key element to any tarp setup is the strategic location of the canoe paddle. Keep water from pooling on the roof.
I see. So you've really made a science out of this and even combined architecture with hydraulics.
Precisely.
I see we have the stove in the middle.
Well, the hearth is the heart of any kitchen, hence its central location.
Annie's preparing something warm on a rainy day?
Yeah, for our first course today, we have a lovely potato pumpkin soup with a light curry flavor. I pre-packaged that at home with all my dried ingredients. It should take about 3 minutes. Would you care to join us?
I'd love to.
Great. Pull up a chair.
Well, as you can see, with a little bit of planning, roughing it in the bush can be absolutely sublime. The river and our canoes have just come off a huge piece of granite, some of the oldest rock on Earth called the Canadian Shield. And now begins the transition into the James Bay lowlands. From here it's about 5 days paddling to the bush towns of Missinaibi and Moose Factory. And there we'll load our canoes onto the freight train and say goodbye to the self-reliant life where you're pushed forward only by the current and the rhythmic sound of a canoe paddle slicing through the water. I'm John Veman. We'll see you next time on Trailside. You got it?
Great.
You're in.
Got it.
It's all yours.
That's it.
I think I just heard him call all aboard, so let's hustle along, you guys.
Pile these up against the canoes to keep them from tipping over.
Okay, guys. Help me, Getch. Ready?
Here's your last chance. Better get out.
Go, Jake.
Thanks. All right, let's go.
Close your eyes, John. Are they closed?
Guys, we're about ready to come in and block this thing out and do it.
Wouldn't mind doing one more.
You wouldn't mind doing another one? Let's do the wild sound right now.
Do this wild track right here and
Rolling.
You want me to be walking?
52, take 2.
All speed. Quiet, please. And action.
I've been an outdoor writer and editor for well over 20 years now. I've covered every kind of outdoor activity, but few things get my wanderlust going the way a wilderness canoe trip does. You not only get to taste the wilderness, you get to feel its pulse as the river pulls you along on your journey. Rivers always add a new dimension to any outdoor experience, so I was really excited about this show. The first part of this two-parter was a departure from our standard Trailside fare, since we weren't actually going to go anywhere, just get ready to go somewhere. We didn't have a dramatic setting to complement our usual dose of how-to information, but looking back on the results, we ended up with a show packed with solid and useful information, and it moves as freely as the river we were on in part 2.
I think we should just go right to the material, cut the foam.
For a 2-week
Back to
trip.
share her camp kitchen magic with us was Trailside chef Annie Getchell. If you haven't seen her on past shows, you've seen her food. She's the one who works up our menus. And I'm always impressed with Annie's knowledge of food, and I'm even more impressed with her ability to prepare it. We were lucky to have her on this trip. Her expertise means she often has her pick of trips to go on this time of year. But best of all, Annie was already familiar with the Missinaibi since she had run it a year earlier. This show was the on-camera debut for Annie's husband Dave, who has been one of the main technical advisors for the series. Getch, as everyone knows him, is also the equipment editor for Backpacker magazine. If we appear comfortable with each other on this show, it's because we've worked together now for over 15 years. So you're watching a couple of old friends plan a trip, and that's about as realistic as it gets. Another friend on this show was Steve Landick, and I always look forward to being around canoes with him. He's one of the top marathon paddlers in North America, and I always learn something new whenever we're on the water. When you have someone like him navigating, you can pretty well settle in and just enjoy the scenery and take pleasure in the simple motion of paddling. When we finished this show, it was only a matter of a couple days before we were standing on the banks of the Missinaibi River itself, and I don't think there ever was a group better prepared for it and so anxious to get underway. Camping in a slot canyon is a lesson in simplicity, since there's not much space down here. You start with your campsite selection. You want to have it well off the canyon floor, with reasonable protection from the wind and the water, with a nice flat spot to sleep. Now, as far as your gear goes, you want to keep it limited to the bare essentials. That means a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, a cook kit, a stove, food for the duration, and extra clothing. And to keep your clothing dry, you want to use a double bag system of 2 trash bags inside a stuff sack, and then that goes inside your pack. Oh, and about your sleeping pad, you want to think foam. The abrasive rock and cactus down here will quickly shred the inflating type. And finally, remember that you're in a constricted space down here, and that means you pack out everything you pack in, including human waste. And a real effective system for that is a hard plastic container with 2 trash bags inside. Take 24 satellites, add $13 billion, and a computer the size of a small radio, and what do you get? A global positioning system that lets you find your exact location anywhere on Earth. Hi, Jim.
Hi, John.
Well, Jim White works for Magellan Systems, one of the companies that's developed handheld receivers for outdoor enthusiasts. Now tell me how this works.
Well, this was developed by the Department of Defense during the 1970s to provide worldwide positioning and navigation. And with a GPS receiver, you're going to pick up signals from those satellites you were talking about, and it'll calculate your position location anywhere in the world.
Now, what numbers am I looking at here on this screen?
What you see here on this screen are the precise latitude and longitude coordinates for this location. You're also seeing the elevation for this location because we're locked onto 4 satellites.
Now, how does this work in adverse weather?
It's great. The beauty of GPS is it not only is worldwide at any time of the day, but it'll work in any kind of weather so you won't get lost.
You want to show me how it works down here in the field?
Be glad to. To give you an idea how you can use GPS to navigate from one point to another, I've created a little test. What I did was walk out to a remote location, set up a campsite, and now I've recorded that in the unit's memory so that we can navigate back there from any point in the world. What it's telling us is that from our present position, We need to go at a heading of 282 degrees magnetic for a distance of just about a mile.
And this little circle with the plus sign in it is that campsite you set up.
That's exactly right. And as we walk, and we walk towards that location, you'll see the circle move towards the top of the arc.
Okay.
When it does, we're right on target.
Okay.
We've got to go around some obstacles at the moment so that we can't go in a straight line, but this allows you to see your orientation to that campsite nonetheless.
So this won't tell you where any natural obstacles are, like a ravine or a river, so you still need a map and compass with you, right?
You're absolutely right. You should never go out into the backcountry without your map and without your compass. But for now, what I'd like to do is have you stop right here, because with a 5-minute head start, I'm going to go to camp, and I'd like you to find your way using GPS.
Okay.
See you later.
All right. Now, if I'm not there in 5 minutes, is this thing going to self-destruct?
Hey, John. Now, that didn't take long.
Yeah.
How was it?
Well, I have to admit I had a lot of help from above.
Well, how about some coffee?
That sounds good. These days, paddles come in all shapes and sizes. So let's start with the shaft. Now, this paddle isn't warped. The shaft is actually bent to increase efficiency. As you move the paddle through your stroke, the bend helps you avoid lifting water with your paddle blade, and instead moves you forward through the water. Now, bent shaft paddles are designed primarily for straight ahead power paddling. For steering, they might feel a little squirrely, so if it's control and maneuverability you want to reach for a straighter shaft paddle. Now, another important part of the paddle, of course, is the blade. And the most important thing here is the blade size. You might think that a larger blade will help you go faster, but in fact, the opposite is true. Take this marathon canoe racing paddle with a very small blade. It's designed to help you maintain a very fast cadence. And canoe racers maintain a cadence of like 80 strokes per minute, and they want to have the paddle out of the water as little as possible. The smaller blade size is also less tiring on your arms. When it comes to materials, most people prefer the natural flex and warmth of wood. But the high-tech synthetics like that 14-ounce carbon fiber racing paddle can shave pounds off the weight of your paddle.
Well, I'm starting to slip a little bit. What do you say we stop and check our wax out?
Yeah, I'm losing my kick too. You got wax, Andy?
Yeah, actually I've got some right in my pocket here. I'll show you a little trick so we don't have to take our packs off.
Okay.
If you want to flip your ski up,
All right.
I'll wax your ski, and when we're done you can do mine.
All right.
I think this warmer wax is going to work a little better for us today.
Yeah. Well, the temperature's really risen since we started out this morning. It must be 20, 30 degrees warmer.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that's really the whole idea behind waxing, is paying attention to the weather. And generally what you've got is a situation where colder snow and snow crystals have very sharp edges to them. And these edges, or snowflakes, can grip harder waxes a lot easier, and you get good glide.
Yep.
But as then the weather warms up, these snow crystals begin to transform more into small little balls with water around them. So essentially you've got a ball that needs a lot softer, stickier wax to grab and to get a good grip. The real trick is balancing between getting a good grip and a nice glide at the same time.
It's a lot more to waxing your skis than just looking at the color of the canister. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, that gives me a pretty good kick. Want to do it?
Great.
Ready
Let's
to head
give
out?
it a whirl.
Okay. The sled looks pretty simple.
Yeah, it's a very elegant design that has evolved over hundreds of years of use. And it's done largely with lashing, so the sled has lots of give and flexibility for it. On the back here...
Where's the steering wheel?
Well, there's no steering wheel. You'll find that steering is a matter of shifting your balance.
Okay.
And you're going to perch a foot on that runner.
All right.
Hands go up here on the bar, and here's a very important piece of equipment. That's our brake, which you have to step down on very firmly to bring these anxious dogs to a halt.
Okay, stomp on that one really well.
Exactly.
Well,
I thought we'd take a couple of practice runs.
Okay.
And then we'll head out from here to Basswood Island.
Okay. And that's right out there?
Yeah, it's just a little over a mile. There's some great spots to camp.
Okay. How long do you think it'll take us to get there?
Oh, we'll go fast today. Shouldn't take long at all.
Okay. So you just pull up these anchors?
Yeah, we'll pull up our snow hooks, which serve as parking brakes.
Okay. Oh, they're ready to go,
They sure are.
Didn't even give them a command yet. They're ready to jump. Well, you want me to give them the call?
I'll let you do the honors.
All right.
Great.
You just push with your foot like that?
Yeah, with your outside foot, use that as a pivot point. Okay. Give it an occasional kick and also to maintain your own balance with.
Okay.
And that assists you with steering the sled and keeping it upright.
It's a pretty narrow sled, but it's it's fairly stable.
Yeah, it is. It's a little tough for two people on here, but and in the deeper snow now, of course,
it slows down.
And pay a little extra attention to your balance.
Guys, we're about ready to come in and block this thing out and do it.
Wouldn't mind doing one more.
You wouldn't mind doing another one? Do the wild sound right now. Do this wild track right here. And
rolling. You want me to be walking?
52, take 2.
All speed. Quiet, please. And action.
Bugs, humidity, rain. It's the ideal location.
Beauty, bugs, and mud. It's not always in that order, but the Missinaibi River has all of it in spades. It gets more than its share of bad weather too, but we lucked out on this episode and only had one all day of rain. We had plenty of wet dinners though. The Miss is a classic wilderness river with a good mix of whitewater and flat. It's a river that keeps you flexible since you're never quite sure what's around that next bend, or how the water level may have affected things. We were constantly on the edges of our canoe seats. The highlight of the river has to be Thunderhouse Falls, and with no one else on that river, we snagged the best campsite for miles around, 200 feet straight up on a rock outcrop overlooking the falls and the canyon just below it. It was one of those sites that gets embedded forever in your memory. The scenery was spectacular, but the most challenging stretch was far from pretty. I'm talking about a 3-mile portage around a second set of waterfalls as the river comes off the last bit of Canadian Shield. Not only is it a long way to carry a canoe with a pack on your back, it's mud almost start to finish. We filmed a promotional spot for the show in one of its muddier sections where I was up to my thighs in the muck. I really enjoyed this episode more than most, although the crew would feel a lot differently about it. The bugs may have been the reason, or maybe it was the freeze-dried food, or it could have been lugging hundreds of pounds of camera and sound equipment through the miles of mud. It wasn't just another day at the office, that's for sure, but in any case, we all agree that it's one trailside we won't soon forget. Barty, any last-minute tips before we head out?
Well, yeah. There's 3 essentials that you always got to watch out for when you head out around here. And that's water, and sun protection, and insect protection.
Okay. Now we've got 2 different containers for our water. One's hard, one's soft. Is there a reason for that?
Well, yeah. We're going to be going out to the Gulf Coast Islands. There, water's tougher to come by for the raccoons.
Yeah.
So we got an armored water container for out there. We'll use this one up first and rely on this one when we get out there.
Okay. How much water do we need?
We use about 3 quarts a day.
And now for sun protection, what are we using there?
Well, we got our hats. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And we've got some good waterproof sunscreen, and then we've got some stuff for our lips.
And you mentioned bugs? This is winter. There's no bugs down here.
Well, even in the wintertime, you can have bugs in the Everglades. So you always need some kind of insect protection, some kind of insect repellent, and then some kind of the skin softener. That's really good for the sandflies.
Where are we going to run into sandflies?
Well, out on the Gulf beaches, if the wind dies, you can sometimes get some.
Well, what do you say we pack up and get on out of here?
That sounds great to me.
Was the equipment for canyoneering any different than it is for just ordinary climbing?
Well, it has to be a little different because canyoneering is really a mixture of several different sports. It's part rock climbing, part desert hiking, little crevasse rescue thrown in, even Navy SEALs training, as you're going to find out.
Okay. Well, what about the rope? Is that any different?
Well, this is a static line, and it's a lot like a steel cable because with body weight on it, it won't stretch at all. A regular climbing rope, a dynamic rope as they're called, is for absorbing energy of falling climbers, but we don't have to worry about that, so we'll use one of these. This type of rope also takes the abrasion over sharp rock edges really well.
Okay. And what about your harness system? Do you have any preference there?
I like a harness that is real simple, lightweight, and doesn't have a lot of padding so it dries out quickly. We're in water problems a lot in canyoneering. But whatever harness you use, you want to make sure that you make that triple wrap. Once, twice, and number 3. There you go. That's what makes the buckle safe and secure.
Well, the nice thing about these new harnesses is that they have the directions sewn right inside the belt, so you can't do it wrong.
It's a nice safety feature.
Now, for your descending device, do you use a plain old figure 8?
Well, as you can see by this worn little device here, I've used that in canyons a lot. They work well. I like them for water problems particularly because I can get on and off the rope very quickly. But the whole principle of using a descent device is friction. The wraps around the bars here create friction so that my body weight is dissipated by the friction of this device. If I need to stop or slow down, all I have to do is run the rope around the back of my body like that. It's very simple, very safe.
Now, what if you lost your figure 8? How would you rappel out?
Well, with these extra carabiners, you just set up a carabiner brake propel. And every canyoneer should know how to do that in case they drop one of these.
Yeah. I notice your carabiners don't have locking gates on them, which is what I usually use on my figure.
That's a nice feature, and a lot of climbers use that. But in canyoneering situations, mud and sand can get in here, and sometimes this gate won't open or close properly. So it gets to be a problem. But if you use carabiners like this, with their gates in opposition, that opposition keeps the figure 8 from coming out. And it always works. It's a foolproof system, and that's why I like it.
Hey, I saw this hammer over here. What are you going to use this for?
The hammer goes with that drill down there. This is a percussion drill, and you pound on it and twist at the same time. That gives you a nice 3/8 inch hole. And then into that, you're going to put one of these expansion bolts. You tighten them with a wrench. They get bigger at the end. That's that. Nice anchor.
Then you just feed this webbing through it like that?
Yeah, exactly. You tie this off at whatever length so that it can go over the edge. Then you can pull down your rope nice and safely without having to pull it over the edge.
And then you just leave this webbing on the anchor?
Yeah, you'll leave that. Most of the time, you're going to be looking for a natural anchor, like a tree or a boulder or something like that. And then you don't have to deface the rock by drilling bolt holes unnecessarily.
We're in Brimson, Minnesota, getting a royal welcome from the sled dogs of Kathleen Anderson. Hi there, Coyote. How you doing? Oh. Kathleen has worked on the sled dog racing circuit up here and breeds and trains sled dogs for recreational mushing in the North Country. Hey, Kathleen, what are you cutting there?
Oh, well, we've got some chicken here. It's a really high-protein, high-fat diet for my dogs. Oh, Willow. Yes,
Boy.
You like that, don't you? Yes, good girl.
Well, what are some of the secrets to raising good sled dogs?
Well, it's really important to socialize them when they're young like this, up to 12 weeks, and you need to work with each dog as an individual, and you need to have a lot of patience when you're working with sled dogs, especially when they're young like this. They really need to be worked well with. Hey,
it's
puppies,
not hard.
hi.
They're sure cute and cuddly, aren't
Oh, yes. Come on, guys. I like to get them used to having a harness on when they're young like this. I like to get them used to working as a team, working together. And these guys are pretty young, so I don't put a lot of pressure on them.
they? It doesn't hurt them to be pulling a sled at this age?
Well, they won't really be pulling it. We'll be helping them out quite a bit.
Just get them used to kind of being in a line. And
Yep. They really have a natural desire to pull that's been bred into sled dogs. Hi, Willow. That's a good girl.
Okay.
Hi, Blue. Well, if you want to go stand back with the sled.
Okay, do you want me to give them a signal or anything?
We say hike, hike, Oh, hi, baby. Yeah, okay. Oh, Willow.
Ready?
Good
Hi,
girl. Okay.
Hi, Kike.
Come on, Willow. Puppy, puppy,
Hi,
puppy,
Kike.
puppy, 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 puppy,
Hi,
puppies.
Kike.
Come on, puppies. Puppy, 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 puppy. Oh, come on. Good puppies. Puppy, puppy, puppies. Puppy, puppy, puppies. Puppy, puppy, puppies. Come on, puppies.
How do we go about fishing a lake like this?
Well, what I like to do is approach the bank slowly. We wouldn't want to walk down here too quickly and take the chance of spooking any fish that might be hiding in these rocks. And also I like to look to see if there's any rising fish, generally just what's going on with the water here. I don't see many rises and I don't see a lot of bugs. Aquatic insects are the mainstay of the trout's diet. When there's a lot of bugs, you see the fish coming up on the surface and eating them. So we're going to have to lure them up.
Seems like a lot of work. Whatever happened to worms?
Well, worms work, but it's not fly fishing. Fly fishing offers its own special set of challenges. One thing that I particularly like about fly fishing is that I fish exclusively catch and release. What I catch, I put back. And you take the chance when you're bait fishing that the fish takes it a lot deeper, and it's harder to let them go without hurting them. And the most fun part is what we're doing is we're stalking these fish and we're imitating their diet. That's the whole purpose of the fly.
These are the flies?
Yeah.
Look at that. I wouldn't even know where to begin with something like this.
Yeah, so this is what we use to trick the fish, and the possibilities and the selections. There are a lot of them out there on the market. What I suggest people do is to go to a fly shop near the area you're going to be fishing and ask the people that work in those shops what they suggest. They won't steer you wrong.
Well, we've got a local. Hey Jim, what are you using?
Whatever works.
Well, what's going to work for us?
Well, since I didn't see any specific bugs down there near the edge, I think we ought to go with the attractor pattern. We're going to have to bring them up.
And what's an attractor pattern?
An attractor pattern is just a yummy bug. It can imitate a lot of different types of things. It's not any specific bug. This is a classic, which I think everyone should have in their box, and this is a parachute Adams, a great fly. Another real popular attractor pattern and a real beauty, a particularly yummy looking one I think, is the royal wolf. And I think you ought to give that a try.
Okay.
I think I'll go with this Turk's tarantula here. Looks like a good bug. You gotta believe in your bug. Gotta think like a fish, and I think this looks pretty yummy.
So, how's the kitchen coming along?
Oh, real nicely. Come on in and I'll show you how it works. A nice wide seating area here. You notice how I made the trench for our legs real narrow so that we don't have to bend over so far to get at all the food and cookware.
What's the shovel doing buried into the counter?
Oh, that's our stove surface. Yeah, notice how it fits in there real snug, and I made a nice little wind block here and a little bit of natural flourish. You know, don't just set the table, set the mood.
Nice touch.
Yeah, the soft snow even allowed me to taper the front edge so to stabilize our countertop.
That's great.
Well, how's the sleeping quarters coming along back there?
Well, I have the foundation for the tent all packed out. You want to help me set it up?
Sure.
You know, usually I would have built a wall out of snow for a wind block, but since we were in such a protected area, I just decided to forego that option.
Okay.
You know, these winter tents are great. They've got loops that are very large. I think we'll be able to use our skis and our poles as tent stakes.
You ready to lower?
All set. Let me step down over here. With tide ranges of 9 to 12 feet, you've got to be ready for just about anything out here.
Yeah. Now, is this a pretty typical wharf?
This actually is very typical of all these islands out here. They've done granite quarrying and needed stone wharves like this for the last century or so. A little help Getting in off a dock or wharf is actually pretty hard to do, so if you'll step with your foot just on the outside of the center line, it'll make it a lot easier. It'll hold the boat right in against the pilings.
Okay. Yeah, that works just dandy.
All right.
Step right in.
Get myself in here. There's a difference between a small and a large cockpit. I have to sit down and then wriggle in. All right.
You didn't have to wriggle that much before, Ken.
That's age, John, and time. Will really do it to you.
Trailside is brought to you in part by Chevy Trucks. Next time you're having fun outdoors, make sure Mother Nature has a good day too. And LL Bean, providing sporting gear and apparel for people who love the outdoors for over 80 years. And High Tech Sports, who invite you to enjoy the great outdoors and follow the trail to adventure.